I now call officers from NBN Co. Mr. Quigley, would you like to make an opening statement?
I would, yes, Chair, if I can.
And you're tabling a document?
Yes, that's a little map you can see there, so I'll refer to that.
Someone moves that we accept the tabling of the document. It's been moved, declare it tabled.
Okay, well, thank you, Senator. I'll say a few words about the rollout and the next steps we're taking in NBN Co. First of all, if I can just spend a minute or two talking about last year. We put in place some major components that will underpin the NBN rollout. These included signing the construction contracts for the first stage of the rollout in every state and territory, negotiating commercial agreements with Telstra and Optus, opening our national operations and test facility in Melbourne, where we monitor the network and test new functionality. This is a critical facility for NBN. We also announced a 12-month rollout schedule, which I will update tonight. We signed the first commercial contracts with 35 telcos and ISPs, and we lodged with the ACCC the framework for how the NBN will be regulated. And finally, we commenced commercial services on the network. We're pleased to say that there are already positive signs in the market on pricing, and the current range of NBN retail pricing is highly competitive with existing bundled ADSL2 Plus services. Today there are 28 active fibre and satellite service providers offering over 130 price points. This month's Exetel reduced pricing by around 25% to make its NBN plans among the cheapest in the market. And SkyMesh...
Mr. Quigley, who was that? What company?
Exetel.
Exetel.
Yep. And SkyMesh, which is currently a leading satellite reseller, is now also offering NBN fibre services, and they have some 33 price points across 5 speed tiers.
Don't be shy. What's their cheapest price, Mr. Quigley?
The SkyMesh's cheapest price is now $29.
$29 a month. Amazing. Those prices keep going up. No, they seem to be going down.
Down.
Mr. Quigley.
Yes,
sorry.
they're going
I've
down.
interrupted you.
It's the market at work. So,
Terrible song. Yes.
they're paying $24.
So they're making $5 a month.
Yes. Now, that's they of course have a range of tiers.
They don't have shares in that.
Yeah.
Well, that's a tragic reflection on a
could I
very,
just-
very well-known...
Can I just get back?
That's actually quite a,
I'm pretty
quite
keen
a
to get some
statement. I'm glad you're
structure
on
here.
Hansard.
Senator Conroy, Mr. Quigley, can you complete your opening statement?
Okay.
Please?
So the achievements of last year have taken time, as you would expect, because we're tackling issues that have held the industry back for decades. We're also dealing with some unexpected challenges that come with doing what hasn't been done before across a country our size. Last year, when we suspended the construction contract tenders, some said that was proof that the NBN was off the rails. We've demonstrated that this was the right move at the time to get value for money for Australian taxpayers. We got the right outcome because we did the right thing. When we decided to suspend the process, we knew we would see a lot of negative commentary, but it was the right thing to do. We will continue to make the right decisions, regardless of the criticisms that they generate. So I'd like to spend a couple of minutes giving you an overview of an area that has been a significant challenge for us. We've been given the task of connecting disparate building allotments scattered right around Australia as part of the New Developments or Greenfields program. And that's the map I've distributed. That gives you an idea it's a map from our website, in fact, and it shows the locations of these new developments all around Australia. And you can see they are, in fact, all over the place. And we're required to simultaneously build in many places across the country.
Is that the green one?
Senator Quigley, please ignore the questions, because I'll go to questions if you don't want to do an opening statement. I'll go straight to questions. Now, well, you can ask questions about that. I'd want Senator Quigley to finish his opening statement.
Not yet.
Mr. Quigley. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Mr. Quigley, I'm sorry I've reduced your salary. Mr. Quigley, on you go.
Yeah. So in simple terms, NBN Co reticulates the fibre from a fibre access node in a cabinet that's located in each of these estates, which you can see on the map, and we connect up to every connectable premise. Then we build a distribution fibre from that estate to the closest exchange using some interim access service. You can see for some of those dots there in the middle of the map, you've got to bring those back quite a long way. So because of the location of these developments, usually often on the metro and regional fringe, there is little accessible duct infrastructure, and so we have to build new ducts, and that's actually quite time-consuming. So fibre builds in excess of 6 kilometres for each of these states are the norm now, as we're finding. So taking on the wholesale universal service obligation for these development estates before we have a network built is obviously not easy. So it's no surprise that it's taking some time. We are, however, in close dialogue with developers about the actions we both need to take to get a satisfactory outcome for end users. Where people have begun to move into their new homes, we are keeping residents informed of progress and advising Telstra, as the retail universal service obligation holder, that they may receive requests for interim telephone services while the network is being completed out to these sites. We're working hard to meet the demand of developers and solve this timing problem. We're confident that we will, just as we have with many other challenges we faced in the last 3 years. I'd like now to turn to the regulatory environment. There's been a lot of focus on the costs of the NBN, on speeds, on the technology, and these debates have been well covered in this room and in the media. But the regulatory aspects of the project are often overlooked or couched in terms that mean little to the general public. This is a critical issue for the NBN. Frankly, fixed-line telecommunications competition in Australia was in a poor state, but the NBN fundamentally changes this. There are great benefits in having a wholesale network run by a company that is not competing at the retail level and that provides access on equal terms to any RSP anywhere in Australia. The CEO of iiNet, one of Australia's biggest ISPs, said recently, "Since 1999 we have been in constant disputes with Telstra, but now there is very little left for us to argue about." In the NBN environment, access to infrastructure occurs through a simple process, not a series of ongoing regulatory battles. The ACCC approval of Telstra's SSU is the last hurdle before the large-scale rollout of the NBN. We were granted access to some of Telstra's infrastructure in the second release sites as part of the deal we struck with Telstra announced in June last year. It was an interim agreement. But the wider rollout will be unlocked when the ACCC gives assent to the SSU. A couple of weeks after that approval, the key clauses in the agreement will come into effect. At that time, all the planning and design and lessons we've learned can then be put into action in the volume rollout. So now, after an important 2011, we are well placed to get into high gear. So moving on to this year, 2012, we have started well with the announcement of the contract for 2 purpose-built Ka-band satellites. This was the culmination of a 2-year procurement process. We looked very carefully at every possibility for getting the required capacity, including leasing it from existing providers. And I welcome the comments from Optus's CEO, Paul O'Sullivan, yesterday, supporting our decision to build the satellites. It was the right decision. It would have made our job much easier if sufficient capacity were available on existing satellites, but it simply isn't. The capacity we are leasing on the interim satellite service, which we're doing at the moment, we're providing an interim satellite service before we launch the satellites, we're leasing that service, it is costing us multiples of the cost of the equivalent capacity on the NBN co-satellites. Put simply, there isn't enough capacity for our purposes, and having the Australian taxpayer own these new satellites is the right answer. The National Farmers Federation is right when they say this is a very positive development for rural communities. Offering rural Australians a service similar to what the city enjoys now is not providing a Bentley when a Falcon will do. It is simply providing an adequate service to people who need it. Now, if I can turn to some of the rollout statistics. We're gaining pace in the NBN. In the 3 months to January, construction started in areas covering some 58,000 premises, taking the total premises in areas currently under construction to 121,000. This is in addition to the 18,000 we have already passed. By the end of this calendar year, our plan will see the total number of premises passed or with work commenced reaching more than 750,000, in fact 758,000 to be precise. Just in terms of activations, we now have close to 5,500 premises connected to the NBN across the country. This includes about 2,400 in brownfields and approximately 2,900 premises now receiving an interim satellite service. Today I'm also pleased to announce that we have updated the 12-month rollout schedule, adding another 190,000 premises where work will have commenced in the final quarter of calendar 2012. More information on the locations will be available on the NBN Co website tomorrow. There will also be details regarding some adjustments to the intensity of the rollout, with some builds being brought forward and others being extended to avoid unnecessary disruption to local communities. NBN Co expects to release its 3-year plan in the near future, and that will obviously give many more new locations. On communications, we're getting to a position where we can tell Australians more about the network, where and when it will be built, what they need to do to connect, and what it will mean for them personally and also for their businesses. Our communications will be on a national and a local level and is based on creating awareness, building understanding and providing information on how to take up a service. So in conclusion, it's taken time for us to get the building blocks in place, but we are now seeing results. I acknowledge that there are challenges, particularly new developments, but we're dealing with these systematically. In the fibre rollout, with the satellite contracts and on the regulatory side, we're getting on with it. This is also the year when we will test and launch our wireless services around Australia, with the first test site set to go live shortly. We have a team of highly competent and dedicated people in NBN Co who are passionate about building this network in a prudent and efficient way. We understand we are building a critical piece of national infrastructure that will serve the nation for 50 years. I thank you for the opportunity to give you the update on our progress and look forward to providing you with whatever information I can this evening.
Thanks, Mr. Quigley. That was a very extensive opening statement. Do you have that in a form that you could table?
We will have it shortly. I've just made some edits which we're getting done, and we'll provide it to you very shortly. Okay, so somebody moved that that document be accepted as a tabled document. It's been moved, agreed. So we'll accept it as tabled. Minister, can I come to you first up? I know you looked quite happy during Mr. Quigley's report, and I'm not surprised, because it all sounds like lots of good news. But there is... Mr. Turnbull responded negatively to your announcement last week regarding the $620 million investment in 2 new satellites for the bush. He suggests there's enough capacity in the sky to service Australia's broadband needs for the future. In fact, Minister, on his website, and I'll just quote, he says this: "There is enough capacity on private satellites already in orbit or scheduled for launch for the NBN to deliver broadband to the 200,000 or so premises in remote Australia without building its own." Minister, what do you say about that?
Yeah, look, it is very disappointing to see such a predictable response, Senator Cameron. We've just announced the biggest step forward in broadband services to regional and remote Australians in 50 years, and we had some of the most hysterical claims I've seen in quite a few weeks from Mr. Turnbull, claiming that there is existing satellite capacity and future satellite capacity. As Mr. Quigley's noted, Mr. Paul O'Sullivan, probably just about the largest satellite operator in Australia, has made it clear that you can't use the existing capacity for the sort of service that we are intending to supply. Now, that's a company that knows something about satellites, has a few in the sky. If you want to also look at, I think, Mr. Turnbull's twittering today, and that is probably an appropriate word, he's already running away from his claim that existing satellite capacity can provide the service that we are aiming for. You've also had the McKinsey KPMG implementation study, and it found, and I want to quote specifically, that Currently, there are no plans to launch Ka-band satellites providing broadband coverage in Australia, and it is unclear whether the market by itself will supply the desired capacity. For this reason, the advice of the implementation study is that NBN Co should contract with satellite operators to provision a new satellite platform comprising 2 next-generation Ka satellites and the required gateways. So the McKinsey's had a look at it. NBN have spent the best part of 2 years doing research and tendering for it. Mr. O'Sullivan, and again I'll quote him, "The first point I would make is that the NBN satellites are purpose-built to carry broadband traffic. Our satellites carry broadband traffic but have not been designed specifically for that purpose." And part of the issue around this debate is that there are fundamental differences in satellite between the Ku band, which we use, and the Ka band, which is increasingly used internationally for broadband services. The difference is the way in which the spot beams are tailored and focused in order to carry traffic. And we mainly carry broadcast-type content, video, television programming, etc., on our satellites. That is quite different than the Ka band, which is what is used for broadband satellite. What you would see is a difference in capacity and economics and speed between a Ka band satellite and a Ku band satellite. We could carry this traffic, but we would not be able to do it with the speed, economics and capacity that a Ka band satellite could do it with. That is the reason why they chose to go that route, and we are happy to cooperate in working with them in order to assist them rolling it out, Mr. O'Sullivan explained. It doesn't get more simple or straightforward than that. So claims that there's enough existing capacity are just a complete and utter furphy. It's a deliberate mislead of the Australian public. And then there's the claim, and I think Mr. Quigley may, if he gets a chance, speak to it. There is the claim.
Yeah, sure.
This is an estimates committee where we inquire of the Department and NBN Co on their expenditure of money.
And we're inquiring about expending $620 million at this moment in time.
Well, if I
Yeah,
might,
what's the point of order?
Well, he's talking about some claims that someone made, and he's answering.
Australia's largest satellite operator, yeah.
He's answering them. I mean, if he wants to give us the information, that's fine. But if he keeps referring to what other people have said, and Mr. Chairman, as I say, why doesn't he just—he's got a prepared answer.
Yeah, no point
somehow
of
he
order.
knew. Somehow he knew the question was coming. Why doesn't he just table it and let's get on to questions?
Carry on, Senator Conroy.
Thank you. So Mr. Quigley could probably opine at some length about all of the proposed builds that are going to be put into space, including the Ka ones, and how much capacity is available, where they're sited, whether or not they're actually over Australia or not. So anyone wants to ask him that question, you feel free. But I just wanted to go to one of the criticisms from one of the companies that was in the newspapers called Intelsat. And Intelsat gave a submission to the Senate Select Committee on the 3rd of July 2009. And Intelsat are in there complaining that we should have leased. But here's what they said in their Senate submission. Given the population and the target data rate for the NBN, Intelsat believes that the direct-to-consumer element of the satellite NBN will require 2 multi-spot beam Ka-band satellite payloads to serve the Australian geography. These advanced payloads would deliver service into multiple high-power spot beams, providing contiguous coverage across the desired service area. And he goes on to say, the stated NBN target of 12 megabits to the consumer is a challenging design criteria. Now, I'm just responding to the criticism that has been made by people around this table. People around this table have made this criticism.
Senator Conroy, order. Senator Boyce, this is a very well-behaved committee, and we are very disciplined, so I'd hope that you could keep that tone. Senator Conroy. Senator Conroy.
Thank you. So let me be very clear. Those that have been claiming that they've been listening to the satellite industry, like Mr Turnbull, and criticising the $620 million that we are spending on these satellites, need to actually have a look at some facts, including what they've said themselves.
Okay, Minister,
I'm happy to pass on.
You happy to pass on? Okay, well, I'll pass on as well. Senator Fisher.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say pass away, and I thought, oh, don't give up that early.
I can come back a little bit later, Senator.
Okay.
Wouldn't want to be accused of hogging the floor.
Senator Fisher.
Thanks, Chair.
Well, given that you've
Mr.
made about
Quigley,
1 minute's
Mr.
contribution
Quigley.
so far, Senator Boyd, so I look forward to you actually making an intelligent contribution.
Order, please, Chair. Order. Order.
Yeah. Order.
Mr. Quigley, how many premises in total will be passed with fibre and ready for service in total by June 2012? And how does that compare with the corporate plan target?
Okay.
Save me the job.
Yeah. So,
You should ask more questions.
Senator, first of all, probably what I should say, if you're looking at our December 2010 corporate plan, I would draw your attention, first of all, obviously, to the statement that we made in there when we talked about the number of premises that we would pass and then activate on a very big assumption. We made that quite clear, by the way, and in this place, I have stated that several times. It was based on the premise that the Telstra deal, the SSU, would be approved and we would be in commencement by June of last year.
So based on that assumption...
I don't think he's finished.
I haven't finished yet, Senator, if I can continue. So based on that assumption, clearly that didn't happen because the SSU, as we know, has not yet been approved by the ACCC.
Senator McDonald.
He's not even at the table.
That one I can't answer, Senator.
We could be
Mr.
lucky
Quigley,
though. We could be lucky
righto.
and get a win-win.
You asked for that. Yeah.
So that's one assumption that was very clear in the December 2010 plan, that we needed to have that agreement in place. As we know, it hasn't been done. The other thing that the December 2010 plan was based on, it was in the greenfields area. There were, in fact, some 35,000 premises that we expected to pass and activate as part of this greenfields, the policy for us doing new developments, which subsequently, in a policy decision, were handed back to Telstra. That was their responsibility. So the first thing I would ask the committee to make sure is that they understand, if they're comparing the December 2010 plan with what the plans are now, those are two very, very significant changes. There's been some other changes, by the way, in priorities that the government has given us for regional Australia, priorities on fixed wireless. So the plan has changed. What I would like to do, if I could, is get you the numbers based on the information that we will be publishing tomorrow in our website, which will show the number of premises we expect to pass by, I think you asked, of June next year.
So the answer is you'll take it on notice?
Yes.
Oh, whoa.
Senator Fisher.
Whoa.
Senator Fisher, it's your own colleagues. So
Thank you. So you're unable to answer tonight, Mr. Quigley, how many premises in total will be passed by fibre and ready for service in June 2012?
I just want to make sure, because we obviously
number
are doing
exactly
planning,
right.
so you've got an
Okay,
exact
all right.
number that's
Thank you.
correct.
Thank you.
I'd like to make sure
But you might be able to
check it.
answer that before you leave here
We may
tonight.
be able to. I'll have a
right,
look, yep.
thank you. Secondly, I understand your explanation as to key assumptions that have walked out the back door, but
Walk out the way.
despite
Policy changes
that,
and commercial negotiations.
Despite that,
you can respond. With
what was the target? What was the equivalent? What was the target of premises to be passed with fibre by June 2012 under the corporate plan?
You mean the previous corporate plan? I've just
December
explained the assumptions
2010.
change.
You've told me the assumptions fell over.
I
Nonetheless,
think
how
there was
many
a target,
premises?
for instance, in Greenfield
in
to
total?
35,000, and as Mr Quigley has explained repeatedly, this was an assumption based on NBN doing all greenfields.
Understood.
A deal was then struck.
That's
A
the
deal
aborted
was-
build, own, transfer plan, isn't it?
Yes,
That's gone
which
back to
was
Telstra.
then changed
Understood.
following an agreement. So those 35,000 homes were transferred back to Telstra.
That was part of 120. So that was the bot. That's when the model changed.
Do you have a figure, Mr.
Well,
Quigley?
yes, so we just looked up the corporate plan. For that was the what we call the FTT Greenfields bot model, which was 120,000 to be passed by June 2012.
Greenfields.
Yep.
What about premises in total, brownfields as well?
The brownfields was, I'm looking up the corporate plan here for June 2012, 132,000 in brownfields.
So am
Providing
I...
the start date
Date
was the...
It was, we were supposed to have the Telstra deal
The SAU,
ratified,
etc.
done by June of last year.
We'll finish the answer.
Yes, by June of 2011.
So am I adding 132,000 for brownfields to 120,000 for greenfields? Are they the two figures you gave me?
They're the two figures from the corporate plan.
Thank you. Okay, 152,000 premises as stated by the corporate plan to be... Sorry, 252. Oopsie. That's why I wanted you to add it up for me. 252,000 premises in total to be passed by fibre by June 2012, as projected in your corporate plan of December 2010. And you'll come back to us, Mr Quigley, as to how many in actuality.
Yes, you need to add another 7,000 for a separate greenfields build. Yep.
Oh, from
So it
the
should add another
corporate plan?
7,000 to
So
that.
there was the build, operate, transfer component.
Yeah.
And then there was the actual NBN
Yep.
build or...
Okay, got that. All right. Then I think, yes, so you've already answered then, you've told me how many greenfields were part of the target under the build-own transfer plan, and that was 35,000.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Can you also, later tonight or else on notice, indicate as part of your total figure how many of those will be greenfield sites that will be ready for service by June 2012?
Yes, well, I think we can do that, but we have a problem with greenfields, Senator, if I can just make sure you understand. Yeah. What we also wrote in the corporate plan...
points of interconnect, but anyway, we'll get to that
apart
in
from
a bit.
points of interconnect.
That's a technical issue which is...
I'll ask about that in a minute.
Apart from that, this is which we made very clear. These were our best estimates of a demand model on the basis of information that we were given by the developer community of what estates would be starting and where they would progress to a certain time. So this was not something we committed to deliver, Senator. This was something that was our information we got from developers. Okay? The world changed in that time.
Thank you. So due to the lack of points of interconnect with your greenfield sites...
No, it's different to what you haven't asked the first part of the question. You're now asking the second half of the question.
I haven't asked it yet, so
no.
That's pretty good.
You've jumped... it is...
That's pretty good.
Thank you. But you'll actually have to explain the first half of your question.
Yeah. Mr Quigley, how much is going to be spent, will be spent, in 2011 and 2012, and then in 2012 and 2013 on backhaul for greenfield sites?
I can't tell you that number off the top of my head, Senator.
We're happy to take it on notice.
Thank you.
Now, when you talk about backhaul, you're talking about the managed backhaul service that connects from the point where we get onto a network back to our interim POI sites, or are you talking the backhaul that we actually have to put in? Because they're two separate pieces. Both. You like both?
Thank you. Tasmanian NBN Co, is it correct that they no longer produce an annual report?
I'm not sure they were ever producing an
And
annual
that they
report.
report
I didn't know they'd ever
produced an annual report.
Produced one. I don't think
they did once upon a time.
Look, I'm happy to be corrected, but I haven't seen it if they did.
So they report, don't they, as part of the consolidated NBN Co reports?
Yes, they're a 100% subsidiary of NBN Co.
Okay. Do they still have a board that's being paid sitting fees?
They still have a board, yes.
Why? What do they do? Tasmanian NBN Co board for their
with the local
sitting fees?
community. They're currently working on a range of issues around promoting the NBN in Tasmania specifically, bearing in mind that this was the first and the most advanced area. They are running a whole range or in the process of organising a whole range of education campaigns with a Tasmanian focus because they're the most advanced of the proposals.
So what's happened to the joint venture with the Tasmanian government?
Look, I'm not
that
sure.
We heard a lot about.
I'd have to say I suspect you need to go and read Hansard. I think we declared that was dead at least 12 months ago.
Yes, well, wasn't Tasmanian NBN Co set up to work in conjunction with that joint venture, which was abandoned quite some time ago?
And if you remember, there were some Tasmanian government-nominated board members, all of which are now gone, and it is operating entirely as a 100% subsidiary of NBN Co now, rather than the original model. But I think we announced that and have discussed this
So then why aren't
over 12 months ago.
why aren't the decisions 100% subsumed by decisions of NBN Co? And why the need for a separate board and separate sitting fees?
I believe that there is a need for a Tasmanian-focused board, and this was a cabinet decision ultimately when we appointed the board.
Well, you need one
to
because
ensure-
Cabinet decided that you need one.
That was a cabinet decision, yes, and the purpose of it is to promote in the most advanced of the areas. I mean, the NBN Co itself was busy designing the engineering for the entire mainland.
Isn't Tasmania ready to run on its own yet? Perhaps Senator Bushby will pursue that shortly.
I'm not
I mean,
quite sure.
why do you still
I'm
need
not quite
Tasmania and
sure.
NBN Co to prop it up?
Sorry, if I could just answer your question before you move on to your next question.
Yeah, I've got one more and then...
I'm not
we
sure
might
what you
move
meant
to
by
Senator
isn't
McDonald.
Tasmania ready to run on its own? If you could explain that a little bit further.
Without the propping up of Tasmania and NBN Co. Why does the government still
engineering-
need Tasmania and NBN Co to run its propaganda in Tasmania?
Well, you will characterise information to the public in whatever way you see fit, but the Cabinet and I believe strongly that there is a need for a separate Tasmanian focus as it's much further advanced in terms of its deployment. It will be completed before the rest of Australia, and so there is an extra need to promote in the... Is there something wrong with your hand, Senator Fisher?
No, I'm crossing my fingers.
Oh, okay. I just thought perhaps there
I'm
was
that
something wrong with
confident.
your hand.
No.
You didn't get it caught in a car door or anything.
No.
That's good.
That's good.
The Tasmanian build will finish before others. Tasmania, and we started here, and I've said this many times before, is the toughest broadband market in Australia. It has the lowest take-up in Australia because it's had the worst prices and the worst services under your previous government. So Tasmania is always going to be the toughest place to pitch anything revolving around broadband because it's had such poor service and high prices. So the Tassie NBN Co board, Tassie's NBN board is there to deal with an extra level of information that's going to be necessary. Do you have any further questions, Senator Fisher?
Senator Fisher,
Yes, I have. I'd like to go to one other area before we move on.
one other area or one
Yeah,
other question?
one other area. An answer to a question on notice I have.
Thanks.
Question 571, I asked about legal fees. Can we refer to that, please, Mr Quigley? NBN Co seems to have spent the interesting figure of, for the year 2010-2011 of 35.64 million.
Yes,
Total fees paid to law firms for all legal and regulatory support
and
services.
that also includes the bankers' fees. So when you're doing a transaction such as the one we did with Telstra, you normally get
$11
an investment
billion
banker.
net present value.
So is that what you
The biggest
referred to
corporate
as
deal in
regulatory support fees?
No, regulatory support fees is regulatory support. It's in the amount which I'd normally call the legal. We grouped it legal and because it's all supporting the activity around this very large contract.
My question was, what sum did NBN Co spend on legal services for the year 2010-2011?
Well,
The one stated there?
yeah.
So is the answer 35.64 million?
The
And if not, why was that given to me?
The 35.64 million includes, we group in the company together in one bucket, legal fees, the fees associated with the transaction, which happened to be with Goldman Sachs, and regulatory to support services, which is also lawyers supporting us, regulatory lawyers. So they're all legal fees of a sort.
So that's 35.64 million by way of legal fees for the year 2010-2011.
That's correct. That was when the most
what do you think
intense
Telstra
activity.
spent on it?
Sorry, I couldn't hear the end of your answer, Mr Quigley.
I'm saying yes, that was when the most intense activity was going on the Telstra deal,
Okay.
and by the way, the Optus deal. We had a number of them going at once.
Okay. My third question was how much of those legal fees were spent on legal services for that year from private firms, and asked you to provide a list of each service and costs. And the answer is refer to answer A, which I've already read out and doesn't go to that issue at all. What's the answer?
These are answers from the government, so
Sorry? I thought you were asking Mr Quigley a question.
Well, they were asked of NBN Co.
Sorry. What was your question, Senator Fisher?
I asked what sum did NBN Co spend on legal services for the year 2010-11 from private firms? Please provide a list of each service and costs. And the answer I got, if you got the question in front of you, CC, it said refer answer to A, and all that answer to A tells me is for the year 2010 to 11, total fees paid to law firms for all legal and regulatory support services were 35.64 million. How much of that was for legal services for private firms? And while we're at it, my next question went on and asked how much of that was for legal services from other sources, and you gave me the same dismissive answer, refer to A.
Legal service from other sources was, as Mr Quigley's already explained, the only aspect there that I'm unsure of is the government solicitor, but I'm happy to take that on notice and double check that for you.
Mr Quigley, are you seriously telling us that NBN Co does not in its books separate out effectively the 35.64 million in any way?
That's the bucket of legal fees, as Mr Quigley said.
So you don't... Did you say that, Mr Quigley?
we have.
Is that how you described it?
Senator, we have a record of every transaction that takes place in the company.
So to what extent are you able to break down the 35.64 million for me? Issue by issue?
We obviously, as I said, if we record every transaction the company that takes place in the company, there are many of them, and yes, of course, we can
No, issue by
cut them
issue upon which you sought legal advice. Are you able to identify it that way?
Yes, we are able to identify it that way.
And break down the fees paid accordingly? Is that an easy way for you to do it?
I'm not sure whether we release information that's paid to individual firms.
And,
These are
normally-
there's a
fair
tender
enough.
and all that sort of stuff.
Fair enough, that I'm not asking for that, but it could be, the third column could be service provided by private firm or other firm, rather than a name.
Sorry, what do you mean by private firm?
I'm completely confused by your question, Senator Fisher. Maybe I'm
Well,
just
perhaps if my question on notice had been answered in the first place, it might help. Mr Quigley, how can you break down the 35.64 million for this committee?
Into what? This is what we keep trying to understand. You keep saying private firms. They don't hire public firms. So what does your question mean? Could you explain it? That would perhaps help.
So there are private firms external to government. There is legal advice internal to government. There may well be legal advice internal to NBN Co, which is formed part of. We don't know because you haven't told us the 35.64 million.
This is a fascinating stream of consciousness, but I don't think the government hires out its services in a commercial sense. As I said, I'm happy to...
So there's no internal billing?
I don't think we
Don't
build.
know how
I don't
you
think we
keep
build the
track
NBN
then.
For legal services?
for legal services.
No.
That's why we're a little confused about your question,
All right
Senator
then,
Fisher.
Mr Quigley, of the 35.64 million, can you please identify to whom those monies were paid?
You mean the list of all the companies that make up the 35.64? I'm not sure I can break it down amount per company because of commercial issues.
All right.
But yes, I think we could give you
All
a
right.
list of all the companies
That
we've
would
used.
be helpful. That'd be a
Yes.
good start. Thank you.
Fisher, keep moving on now. There's been 20 minutes, so I'll go to Senator Ludlam.
Can I maybe start with the satellites that you spoke of in your opening statement? You put two up in case something goes wrong once one of them's up there. Is that part of the thinking?
That's part of the thinking. That's not the main thinking. In terms of providing, we have to provide coverage to 3% of premises, which is close to 400,000 premises. We've assumed a certain take-up, so we've assumed that there'll be at least 200,000 services on this. If you're trying to provide a service at minimum peak speeds of 12 megabits per second with an average busy hour throughput of 300 kilobits per second, you have to dimension the satellites, so we can load share between these two satellites. The other thing it gives you, obviously, is the ability, if one of them was to fail, that you can cover, and we've engineered it that way so that we can cover all of those subscribers with the other satellite. It would be, I think, a very, very bad day if one of those satellites fails after, say, some years, and you have 200,000 subscribers in rural Australia whose broadband disappeared.
Yeah.
Because these things take a long time to build and launch.
I don't want to dwell too much on this, but maybe I'm just fascinated by the idea of one of these things blowing up on the way into orbit. How does the insurance component work? What happens to our investment if one of them doesn't make it up there, for example?
In these sorts of deals, the manufacturer has the responsibility and all insurance up to the point it gets to the launch site. In launch and for 12 months after launch, we take out launch insurance. And we're already well down the track of looking at that and negotiating that. So you simply, in this business, you always take out launch insurance.
Okay, that's been factored into the price announcement and the deals that you spoke of earlier?
It's a separate deal. It's not part of the manufacture of the satellite. So we've placed a contract for the manufacture of 2 satellites.
Yeah.
We're placing contracts in due course for Earth stations, some 10, 11 Earth stations, which are the big dishes that point up at the satellites. There'll then be another contract for VSATs, they're very small aperture dishes which go on people's premises, and then we have to select and let a contract for launch, for the launch vehicle itself, the rocket.
So how much of the total cost of getting them up there has been disclosed? How much is still up in the air, so to speak?
Well, what we've said is the total of approximately $2 billion to do the entire job, and we've just let a contract for $620 million.
Okay, so building them is less than half the cost to put them up there? Yes. Okay.
And that's not just a one-off cost, that's over
A long period of time.
15 years.
These have a 15-year life.
That's a 15-year life running cost.
Including the equipment in the terminals, for a big chunk of the terminals.
So I actually can't hear you, Mr. Quigley.
You can't hear you. No, there's about 5 people having the conversations. Senator, a lot of them couldn't hear. Call yourself to order, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So the $2 billion is the entire 15-year life of the satellites, including putting them up there and operating them.
And launch insurance and rockets and the Earth stations, and a big chunk of the VSATs.
All right.
Carbon tax?
Oh, for heaven's sake. Wrong committee.
I don't think we have a line item for carbon tax, Senator.
Okay. What else was I going to ask you about? I must have missed your press release congratulating the government for putting these things up for regional populations, but maybe I didn't see that.
Well, I've got Mr. Hartseekers. I could tell you all about it.
No, maybe not.
No, please.
So just on the carbon footprint, I don't think we...
Don't encourage him.
Just going to say the fuel that actually burns is normally hydrogen and oxygen, so we might produce a lot of carbon.
There you are. Live and learn. Live and learn.
Mr. Quigley, you're out of order, don't go there.
Yeah. When would you describe, and I'm speaking specifically now about the fibre rollout, which is what most people have focused on, when would you describe the company as being in the volume rollout phase?
We really can't be in volume rollout phase until the Telstra deal has commenced. For one thing, we don't have, at this point in time, all of the national data. We don't get that until the Telstra deal has commenced. So we can only make estimates at this point in time, and we've got some under an interim agreement. We get access to certain information that allows us to do the first and second release sites and something a little beyond. But the real rollout would only get going probably a month or two after we got the Telstra deal done.
So it's actually the regulator holding things up at the moment, or the
That'd
final...
be an accurate way to describe the situation.
Would be or wouldn't be?
Would be.
Would be. Okay. Well, we get to see the ACCC later in the week. The questions that I think Senator Fisher was putting to you before, going back to your corporate plan of December 2010, I've got some relevant bits of that here. And I want to bounce them off the press statement you put out on the 3rd of January, where you noted that 4,000 homes and businesses were already connected.
Yes.
So I'm trying to get a sense of how far how far behind the projections that you put up in that corporate plan we are? For example, can you tell me when you'll be putting out a press statement that's saying you've connected 1 million people? Rough numbers.
Connected 1 million people.
Not past, connected.
Connected
live.
1 million people. I can't answer that one off the top of my head. That'll be some years hence, Senator. Because remember, what we need to do as part of the deal with Telstra, we are retiring the copper network progressively. So there's quite a process that we have to go through.
Well, your corporate plan, tell me if I'm reading this wrong, said premises passed actually was meant to be sometime this financial year you were meant to pass 1 million people with the infrastructure, and then connected...
Sometime this financial year? No.
I'm reading from the...
June 20... You're talking about June 2013?
I'm reading off a graph on page 83 of the corporate plan. It's pretty crude. If there's a better source...
I would, if I could steer you to page 15 where there's a table.
All right.
That was the table we were just having a discussion, and I appreciate you may have zoned out, but we were just having a discussion about those figures with Senator Fisher, and I do truly understand if you zoned out while we were having that conversation.
Sometimes I look like I zoned out even if I haven't. Okay, so page 15.
And sometimes you look like you've zoned out when you have.
When I actually have. All right. If you've already covered this ground with Senator Fisher, I don't propose to go through it again. What I'm trying to get a sense of is if you can tell us approximately how much time we lost, or are we still losing time?
Well, the problem is until we have the SSU approved, we're doing all we can, but clearly we can't get into volume rollout. Yes, that's the SSU which allows the deal to become unconditional, which means we can get information and we can get into gear.
Okay.
We were anticipating that the ACCC would have completed their processes by December 15, you might remember, or 18?
December 20th.
December 20th.
But that was after we originally assumed it would be June.
So we originally assumed June, then it was going to be December 20, and as you may remember, Senator Ludlam, it was announced that that would probably be mid to the end of February. So I suspect if you saw the announcements today on ADSL 2 Plus by the ACCC, that is part of resolving outstanding issues.
Okay.
So I suspect they'll say to you, if you see them later in the week, that we're not far from getting the decision.
Just because bits and pieces are better starting to pop out.
I'm guessing, but I wouldn't want to put words in their mouth.
If I could also mention, Senator, what is important, we have tried to make sure that while these delays have taken place, we're still getting on and doing things that are going to be extremely valuable and useful, which is why we have accelerated and are building out now the transit network. The problem in building out the transit network, which is the connection to all the POIs and all the fan sites, is that it's not highly visible. It's not, you don't pass premises and connect premises, but you're putting in a lot of infrastructure, and we have managed and agreed with Telstra to accelerate that, and that's what we're putting a lot of energy in.
How much is invested in the transit network, Mr. Whittle?
How much is invested in the transit?
Just on terms of, to make the point that Mr. Quigley was, that even though you can't see it, it's still a massive task.
It's several $1 billion is to build the transit network.
But have you got, is NBN being charged late fees or stuff around fees by contractors who thought they would be digging holes and laying cables in suburbs?
We've tried to manage that as carefully as we can.
It sounds like a yes.
Well, obviously I can't say no, we're not going to pay at some point some compensation, because if we really have disrupted contractors, but we've tried to build a very good relationship with the construction contractors, and I think we have good relationships with them, and we haven't seen at this point in time any big impact of that, because we try to give them a reasonable amount of notice before they mobilise. Clearly in this environment you're not being as efficient as you could be, and we're also getting some of them to help us in the transit rollout.
Okay. This begs the obvious question then. Is Parliament passed legislation a year or so ago that actually set an end date, you know, of a rollout concluded date? Has that slipped?
I'm not aware that there was any legislation on a conclusion date.
I forget exactly what the phrasing was. That
Look,
was
I think we said I think we can change it by an instrument, but I think we started off talking about in the original policy documents 8 years and 5 years after the completion. Then I think it became about 9.5 years.
That's right. So
and
there
5
was-
years after the completion.
While we were waiting for the Parliament to pass the legislation,
Yes,
because it was
well,
held up.
being held up
the
by
date
the
slipped.
Parliament, yes.
So my question to either you or Mr Quigley is the date slipped again? Are we going to need to come back and amend that?
No, legislation, Senator, the Minister can by instrument provide a revised date.
Okay, so the Parliament, it'll be disallowable, but the Parliament's not going to have to legislate or change a date. But are we now, the start date's slipped
The
through
term
no
for the
fault of
NBN rollout has changed, yes.
Yes, okay, it has. So what's your estimated completion date?
That's still being worked on. Obviously, while with all these slips,
Until we get the documents,
Yep.
we can't quite finalise that.
Okay. I want to turn to the question of wireless towers, and I understand Senator Williams is going to have a crack at this as well. But the companies come in for a bit of criticism in regional Victoria for, I don't want to repeat the allegations in too much detail, but basically communities are getting up in arms about 40-metre wireless masts popping up without, in the view of some people, without a great deal of notification. They're worried for the same people campaigning against regular phone towers, radiation impacts, visual impacts and this kind of thing. What's the company putting in place to prevent this kind of neighbourhood-by-neighbourhood warfare right across the country?
okay, well, we are, and I should say, Senator, it's clearly in this area. One of the reasons for doing the trials is to identify things we can do better as we roll out. Okay. So we're certainly learning as we go, but we're putting in quite a bit of activity, some of which goes beyond what we have to do under the planning processes. But we're doing that. We've done community information centres. We're planning now to do demonstrations of our truck visits. We've done mediation sessions, particularly in Ballarat. We've had individual meetings with individuals who wanted to have some discussions on that, particular families, down to the level of families. Yeah. We've done letter box drops. We've had invitations to information sessions, and we have also put out information packs to all local councillors. In the end, we have a job to do, which is to get approval, DAs, through local council, and we're trying to give them as much information as we can, and we're going to, in the next round, be trying to give people even more information up front before we apply for a DA process.
In one of the press articles that I saw, I think in one of the regional Victorian papers, somebody, I don't know if it was you, but somebody from NBN was talking about wanting to hang these things off existing infrastructure where possible. In how, I know it's too early to go into too much detail, but in how many instances can you hang them off power poles, power lines, or existing cell towers?
We're looking more at existing cell sites, existing sites for this type of radio equipment. We have in total, for the entire bill to cover the 4%, 2,400 towers, and we will be, we're hoping that we can use at least 35 or 40% on existing towers. Okay. And we're negotiating with existing tower holders for that at the moment.
Okay.
Now,
But mobile towers
Can I say he's getting 15 minutes? That's why.
Sorry?
yeah.
mobile towers essentially already established.
Yes, where they're there, of course we'd like to use them.
Yeah. So could I just give some extra information to you, Senator Lodland, because I know there's been a lot of controversy about this, and there have been a lot of commentary, particularly from some people at the table, about how if only we'd done OPEL, we could have solved this already. Well, I just wanted to, if you'll indulge me, Senator, I just wanted to quote to you that the OPEL network, and I'm speaking here from the Broadband Connect fact sheet with Senator Helen Coombs' face on it, states that the rollout would have 1,361 new state-of-the-art wireless broadband WiMAX sites across the country.
There's about 5 conversations going on.
Can't hear.
And I'd just like to show, and I'd like to table the maps for Victoria, New South Wales of the OPEL tower maps that were published by the previous government. So we can see exactly how many towers that Senator Williams is committed and others around the table are committing to build. And I'd like you to explain to Mr Davey Dixon that you were planning on building towers all over and around his properties. And just to be very specific, I wanted to table both Tamworth and Armidale's OPEL footprint for towers and also the Ballarat footprint for towers. So you can very specifically, everybody can see that the 1,361 new towers that you committed to before we killed the dog that was OPEL. But I want people to be able to see that when Mr Hartzicker and you, Mr Williams, want to promote and champion more wireless, this was your plan, this was your number of towers. And it barely covered 600,000 Australians and had to be cancelled because it didn't even cover them.
Senator,
So I'd like
four
to table
documents
those.
you're tabling. Someone move the tabling of those documents. Being moved.
Sorry, have we got the opening statement yet?
If it's arrived, yep.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Table these documents. They've been accepted.
Oh, and just for the serious record, this is your policy. There is no satellite component.
Okay,
Mr Hartzicker keeps claiming there's a satellite component. Here it is, black and white, no satellite.
Senator McDonald, you have the call.
It doesn't get dumber than that.
Mr Chairman, I'll confine myself to a couple of clarifications and two serious questions. I only have 8 minutes. Other senators have had 15.
I've got you down for 10.
I've got 10. Okay. I thought you wanted some for Sue.
Yeah, we'll fix that.
Okay.
They used to believe
all
in
right.
proportionality when they had the majority.
Whatever.
How many people have they got here?
Just to clarify, there is now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 senators with the call. Senator McDonald for 10 minutes, Senator Bushby for 8 minutes, Senator Birmingham for 10 minutes, Senator Williams for 7 minutes, Senator Boyce for 5 minutes, and myself for 10 minutes.
Okay. Just to clarify, Mr Quigley, I think what Senator Fisher was getting at, your $35.64 million in legal fees included the legal fees paid for your own personal defence of the charges about Alcatel. That's correct, isn't it?
There were no charges. There were no charges for Alcatel.
The allegations about Alcatel. We went through this at the other committee. With the minister wasn't here. You
created the stream of questions that they had to respond.
The minister wasn't here to interrupt. And I just want to clarify, without going any.
Senator McDonald, as a point of order, what the minister did was correct a serious misapprehension by Senator McDonald. So, Senator McDonald, you've got the call.
Good. Mr Quigley, we went through this at the joint committee and I don't intend to pursue it anymore, but I'm just getting you to confirm to Senator Fisher that of the $35.64 million, that included the money paid by NBN to advise you of your legal position in regard to the allegations made against you personally in relation to your former employment.
There were no allegations made against him.
At Alcatel.
None. Zero.
Is that correct?
The answer to that is no. If that's...
Is that correct?
I can't answer the question, Senator. It doesn't make sense to me.
There were no allegations
Well,
whatsoever.
Mr Quigley, let's not prolong this. I don't want to. But we did go through this and it's on the public record. You engaged lawyers in relation to dealings that you had in your former employment with Alcatel. NBN paid for them and they were quite considerable. My only question is, of the $35.64 million that you quoted to Senator Fisher, some of that included those funds paid to legal advisors in relation to your former employment with Alcatel. Is that correct?
We paid money to some lawyers we engaged to answer the questions here at the Senate and at the Joint Parliamentary Committee, Senator.
About your former employment with Alcatel? Yes, that's
You've
right.
already given the numbers on
Yes,
notice.
we
Senator.
have.
So I'm puzzled as the question again.
Well, I'm just explaining for your answer to Senator Fisher that part of the $35 million
Yes, I think it would be
related to the Alcatel issue.
probably rounding in the second or third decimal point,
Okay.
Senator.
Minister or Mr Quigley, you told us in answer to Senator Fisher that there were 259,000 premises thought to be or anticipated to be passed in the December 2010 corporate plan. That's correct? Well, 120 plus 132 plus 7.
Sorry, could you just repeat that, Senator?
You gave the evidence 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, I'm just making
120,
sure
132 and 7.
Yeah, 132, 120 and 7, yeah?
It's on
259.
Page 15 of the corporate plan.
Okay. Now, didn't you say in the statement you gave us earlier, or did I misunderstand you, and I haven't seen the statement then, that so far you've passed 18,000? Is that correct? So you anticipated to pass 260,000 approximately, you've passed 18,000.
No.
Is that correct?
No, that was
No,
the
you're
number
now on
for-
two different timeframes.
Yes, there's
Sorry?
two different timeframes you're talking about there. I'm talking about now, you're talking about June 2012.
So
we
that's,
haven't-
what, 4 months down the track, or 3
Yeah.
months down the track?
And I also said,
Made the
if I can
Yes,
repeat
I
again...
heard
Senator-
what you said, Mr Quigley,
Well,
but I'm
if you
just
let me
making sure
answer
these
that.
are the same
they're
units
not.
we're talking
But
about.
they're not, Senator. I'd just like to make sure that you understand they're not the same numbers because they're based on different premises, different assumptions.
You anticipated passing approximately 260 and 4 months, 260,000 approximately, and 4 months out from that you've now passed, according to your statement at the beginning, 18,000, of which 5,500 have been connected. Is that correct?
We passed, at this point in time, we passed 18,000 premises, I think 18,263 if I recall.
And to labour the point
And-
again,
and-
Senator
and
McDonald...
how many are connected?
And over 5,000, I think you said now. And to
5,000.
labour the point
okay,
again,
and so,
those
so
numbers,
out of
Senator McDonald,
260 you've passed 18.
I'm
Now,
entitled
my next
to
question,
finish
my next
the
question
answer.
relates
I'm
to...
entitled to
Senator
finish
McDonald, the minister
answer.
isn't. You've been around long enough to know the minister's entitled to answer. Minister.
I've got the answer from Mr Quigley.
No,
The minister
I'm entitled to
wants to
supplement
answer.
any answer. And
This is an abuse.
I want to reiterate that that was based on assumptions that were subsequently changed, commercial negotiations where Telstra took over the responsibility for doing a whole range of homes that NBN had previously factored in. They weren't being done by NBN anymore.
Mr Quigley, third-party contractors conducting installation and maintenance on the copper network are required to be licensed by ACMA. Will third-party technicians holding install and maintenance contracts for the NBN Co be required to have ACMA licensing?
So what's the... Can I just ask a point of clarification? What's the ACMA licence?
Sorry?
What's the ACMA licence?
Minister, you are deliberately wasting
I'm actually
my
asking you a
very
genuine
limited
question.
time.
If you could help.
If you'd listen in the first place instead of babbling to yourself, you wouldn't have to keep repeating and asking.
the
Senator McDonald.
Can I... Well, Mr Chairman...
Well, Senator McDonald, you don't help things. You know, you should really just ask the questions and
I
we'll get
did.
on with it. Just ignore...
And the Minister wants me to ask it again.
Ask the question.
No, we've asked for clarification. Which licence from ACMA?
Mr Quigley, can I think
You
Mr
don't know.
Quigley understood the question. Third-party contractors conducting installation and maintenance on the copper network currently are required to be licensed by ACMA. Telstra technicians are not, as I understand it. What I'm asking you is, will third-party technicians holding install and maintenance contracts for NBN Co be required to hold ACMA licensing?
Whatever the regulations say, Senator, we will obviously abide by. Frankly, I don't know the situation for the copper. I can't tell you whether Telstra do or don't need to hold ACMA licences and other people do or don't. But what I can tell you is, if any work is being contracted by NBN Co, we will make sure that the people have the appropriate licences.
Well, you can't tell me whether you do need ACMA licensing for
I
third-party
can't tell you.
Well, can you take it on notice? Thank you. Can you tell me whether ACMA will take an industry-wide regulatory oversight for technicians conducting installation and maintenance on the fibre network?
No, I'm not trying to be difficult. Could you just define who you mean by ACMA, ACMA?
The Australian Communications and Media Authority.
Okay.
As we've said for
No, we just
years,
wanted to make
Senator,
sure that's what we were
everybody knows
talking
what
about.
ACMA is. This is an abuse, Mr Chairman. Did you get that, or do you want me to repeat that question again?
Well, I simply can't answer the question. I don't know whether or not ACMA is taking a national licence for anybody working on fibre networks. I don't know if they do today on fibre networks.
Okay.
I'll have to take that one on notice and check, Senator.
All right. Well, my final series of questions, Mr Quigley. As I understand it, NBN CO's independent contractors in the installation area, there's an incident up my way where Main Roads Queensland, they didn't get permission from Main Roads Queensland to operate a cherry picker on a public road for the installation of the aerial cable. and NBN officers have advised that they are instructing their staff to inspect and audit 20% of all installations. Is that correct? Do you know about that?
I can't answer that one either, I'm afraid.
You'll take it on notice?
I'll take that one on notice, yeah.
Can you tell me what the aggregate cost of these audit inspections is?
No.
You'll
Not off the top of my head. I can take it on notice. Yep.
Can you tell me the qualifications of the personnel conducting the inspections?
We'll take that one on notice as well, sir.
I guess you don't then know what the reporting mechanisms for that installation audit process are?
Yeah, I can tell you we have two sets of audits taking place. We have audits that are done by our construction personnel themselves, and then we have quality audits that are done by a separate quality function. And of course, if anything related to safety, we have also a safety function inside the company, and they conduct independent safety audits.
Okay, well that's good. Well, I've had about 2 minutes of questions, Mr. Chairman.
You've had 10 minutes, Senator MacDonald.
I've had 10 minutes of...
I'm not going to argue about it. You've got 1 minute, then I'm moving on.
Well, Mr. Chairman, this committee, under your chairmanship, with respect, is again a farce. Can I just suggest you go and look at Senator Stirl and see how to run an estimates committee, and you'll understand how to keep...
Senator MacDonald. Senator MacDonald. Okay, we'll have a private meeting. Let's adjourn for a private meeting.
Now, allocating the Greens 15 minutes, and he represents 10% of the population. We represent 40%. He gets 15 minutes.
If you'll allow, Chair, I have
Yes,
an answer.
yep.
Of the 35.64, the preparation to answer the JPC and your questions amounted to 1 point in the last decimal place. In other words, it would be 35.63 without that cost. It was $15,000, Senator.
How much?
$15,000. We answered it under question number 304 some time ago.
I didn't even ask for that. I asked you to confirm that of the 36, part was for that private work for
Yeah,
you.
it was. It was 15,035.64 million.
Senator Bushby, you have the call.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question when they're ready. I have a question regarding the technology used for the trial platforms in Sorell, Smithton and Scottsdale. Is the...
Sorry. Sorell was not part of the first...
Midway Point, to be more accurate.
Sorry,
Yeah,
thank you.
Local knowledge.
So the first three.
Yes,
three of
okay.
the first five. Yeah.
Midway Point, Smithton and Scottsdale. The trial platform that was used, is that the same technology that is now being rolled out by NBN Co across the country?
It's the same generic technology, GPON technology. It's not exactly the same platform from the same supplier.
Okay. Is the hardware or the customer service equipment that's fitted into people's houses the same?
No, it isn't. It's the same generic. It does the same job. It's network terminating devices, but it's not exactly the same as what's being rolled out for the rest of the network.
Is that technology going to be able to be fully compatible and usable by the people who have it as the NBN rolls out?
It's delivering services now, Senator.
Okay. Is there any... are you aware of any suggestions that there will need to be any retrofitting of that technology in order for it to last a distance, so to speak?
It'll certainly last a distance, but at some point in time, we no doubt will decide that we're going to change that into the standard national platform, just because it will be a simpler job for us to maintain it and monitor it.
And is that likely to happen in the near future or the longer term?
We haven't made any decision about when that will be changed.
Are you aware of the attitude of internet service providers to the fact that that technology platform is in place in those locations in terms of the services that they intend to provide?
I didn't understand the question.
Okay, I'll be more specific. I'm aware that, and you're probably aware as well, that Telstra in the near future will be making announcements about its NBN packages.
We have so. We've seen reference to that.
Are you aware that when they make those announcements, they're going to be excluding Tasmania from offering those packages?
I hadn't heard that, no, but I'll certainly inquire.
And you know, well, I appreciate it if you would.
Yes.
And the reason why they are excluding Tasmania is because they don't consider the platform of the technology that is used down there to be sufficiently compatible.
This is
with
an
what they're
NEC
offering.
box versus an Alcatel box. So when we get excited about the word platform,
I'm not a technician. I don't know.
I'm just
all
want
I
to make
know
clear
is,
so you understand. We used NEC boxes in the first sites. The whole rest of the rollout that's been since then, I think, is on the Alcatel boxes. Okay. So I suspect the point you're making is that the original... The original... I was asking
whether you're aware of it.
Yeah, no, but there's two different... and the implication of your question is because they're NEC boxes, they don't fit for some reason. But the Alcatel-Lucent boxes that are in will be in all the rest of the rollout will be the same as on the mainland. So I think the point that you're asking us to investigate is there a problem with Telstra using the NEC boxes
and potentially
that
other
are in
internet
the
service providers?
You mentioned Telstra.
Whether there's a technical... it's been put to me that Telstra, when it makes its announcement, will be excluding Tasmania from
put
the
to you by
offer.
Telstra, Senator?
Beg your pardon?
Is that put to you by Telstra?
At this stage, I'm asking the questions.
Yeah, but I was just
but the information... I was interested in whether you were aware of that.
I hadn't heard.
Clearly
Telstra certainly
not.
hadn't informed me of that.
And the understanding
It's
that
not
I have
all of Tasmania.
the
point I'm making is it's not all of Tasmania using
No, I understand
NEC
that.
boxes.
Well, if you listen to this next question, are you aware that I mean, what I was going to ask you, but obviously you're not aware at all of this, which is quite incredible, but that Telstra won't be offering, what's been put to me that Telstra won't be offering any of its NBN packages in Tasmania until such time as either those three locations are retrofitted with the technology that's being used nationally, or until such time as the new rollouts occur with the new technology. But until that time, Tasmania will be excluded, but they're not up and running yet, from the packages, as it put to me, that Telstra will be offering.
We have Tribunner up and running now, Senator, and that's using the national platform. And I can only repeat that I have not been informed by Telstra that was their position, and that's why I did in fact inquire, has Telstra put that position to you, because they haven't put it to me.
Will that technology, who will be responsible for paying for the retrofitting of those of that platform when it does occur?
We will, of course.
You will be. Yes. Okay, just confirming that. If Telstra's position is in fact, or the position I've put about Telstra is in fact the case, and Telstra is not going to offer its NBN packages in Tasmania until such time as there is a broader scale of the new technology or the broader scale technology, how does that sit with the argument as espoused by both the federal and state Prime Minister, the state Premier, and NBN that Tasmania would be ahead of the game in terms of NBN when it is not even getting the packages from the major internet service provider in Australia that the rest of the country will be getting?
Well, the rest of the country is managing to run on it. Every other service provider is running on it that wants to. But as I said,
Telstra, biggest provider in the country.
We will seek information from Telstra. In fact, I'm sending a text as we speak. So we'll know by relatively early tomorrow morning.
And I don't expect that to have much of an impact, Senator. Frankly, our plan is to finish Tasmania, as we've said, ahead of the rest of the nation.
And when will that be? When will that be? When will Tasmania be finished?
For the 4 years.
Yes, that's right.
We're on target for between 4 and 5 years. We announced.
But that's your target. I mean,
we announced between 4 and 5 years. If you go back to the original press conference, and we're on target to meet it.
Well, Julie Collins, the federal member for Franklin, in October 2009 said that work would begin immediately on stage 2. It didn't start until June of last year. I mean, you're telling us now that it will be done in 4 years. Julie Collins
4 to 5 years was what I said on the first day.
What is different about that undertaking compared to the one that was provided by Julie Collins that work would start 2.5 years ago?
Work would start 2.5 years ago.
She said almost 2.5 years ago, in October 2009.
There's different definitions of what stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4 is in Tasmania to the mainland. So
you're not engendering me the confidence that I was asking for in terms of
we're on
the
target.
fact that you would deliver.
We're on target to meet the timetable.
Well, Julie Collins said in October 2009 work would begin immediately on stage 2. Here we are, almost 2.5 years later.
We are on target to meet the timetable.
Minister Collins, you should use a proper name.
Member for Franklin.
No, she's a minister. Minister Collins.
She's also the member for Franklin. That is her correct.
Doesn't matter. Just points with me.
She wasn't a minister then.
Senator Bushby, you get 1 minute.
Okay. What are your views on the comments by NBN Co regarding the low take-up in Tasmania that the take-up rate is immaterial?
Sorry, who said?
An NBN Co spokesman said in response to some media that I did in Tasmania about the low take-up rate that the take-up rate is immaterial. Is that the position of NBN Co?
The Telstra deal turns the copper off. So arguments about the take-up rate are completely moot because everyone who wants to be on... Because everybody who wants to be on a fixed line, you don't have to take the service, everybody who wants to be on a fixed line will be on an NBN line.
So a service that is not successfully in an open market attracting customers, you're going to force them onto that service by closing down its competitors.
We're building a wholesale monopoly. We're building a wholesale monopoly.
Absolutely.
Yes,
we're in service which
we're in
an open
agreement.
market. In an open market,
don't
customers
argue,
aren't
just
signing up
ask
to.
the question and maybe that will be reciprocated. Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Chair. Mr Quigley, thanks for your time tonight. Can I firstly go to issues around your use of UMR as a polling company and indeed your general use of the general use of NBN Co of polling and market research, and if you can give me details of what market research companies you have engaged and to what extent they've been engaged and what the costs of that engagement are, please.
Okay, well, I will have to provide that information. I don't have it to hand right now. We've gone through a process of selecting companies that do research, and I believe we've selected UMR out of that. But I'll have to provide you the other information that you've asked for. I'll have to provide you. I don't know the details of those contracts in terms of costs or anything else.
Mr Quigley, straying just off of this issue for a bit, and I'll come back to it. Do you think there'll be a point where, when you attend estimates committees in future, that your CFO or other senior executives who might be relevant will attend with you? I understand in the early, you've been wonderful in your availability to the committees. but you're now heading a very, very large organisation, and there will come a time, I suspect, where increasingly questions go to technical details that, like every other agency that appears, you might wish to pass downstream. I'm just wondering if you expect that that may be the case, particularly when we come to the budget estimates in a couple of months' time, which are a longer period of time for the estimates hearings and are more likely to get into a lot more detail. Your knowledge is always outstanding, but we're all only human.
I think over a period of time, yes, we'll be increasing the number of people who will be attending from NBN Co.
I think we should introduce Mr Cooney at this point.
Mr Cooney will probably be sitting next to me at the next estimates.
Okay.
He looks after all of our communication activities.
Right, thank you. In terms of, if I can come back to, it looks after all of your communications activities.
And as well as quite a number of other things.
Well, he may even be quite helpful in this line of questioning then. If I can come back to the work undertaken by UMR firstly, to your knowledge, is that an ongoing series of contracts?
Sorry, Senator.
Sorry, there's some outrageous banter between Senator McDonald and I. You may need to repeat the question.
Thank you. If I can go to UMR, how long have UMR been engaged by NBN Co? Are they still engaged? Can you give us at least some idea of the type of work they've been doing, Mr Quigley?
I believe we've only just selected them.
Only just selected?
Only just selected them, yes.
Okay. I think,
I think that's the case. I'm giving you off the top of my head. I will take it on notice and double check on that.
Yeah, answers to questions on notice from the October 2010 budget, supplementary budget estimates hearings indicated at that stage that you'd employed UMR and had paid $38,940 for qualitative research for first release sites, consultation as a component of NBN Co's community effort.
So I was trying to answer the latter part of your question about going out to a process where we'd selected an agency. So let me just check, Senator. So we've used them from time to time over the past, but we're looking at, as what I described in my opening statement, where we'll be gearing up to doing more communication and obviously having to supply information, the information that people, end users will want from us about what it is they're looking for to learn about the NBN. We obviously need to do some research and I believe that's the work that's gone on in selecting UMR probably to do that type of work. But I'll take that on notice and give you a complete answer.
The market research you're undertaking, is that all of a qualitative nature or a mixture of qualitative and quantitative research? Or
likely to be, I guess, a mixture of both qualitative and quantitative.
Okay. Again, I mean, if the officer here with you is able to give any extra information, that certainly would be helpful to the progression of questions tonight. But Mr Quigley, the scope of contract, it sounds like you've just led, is a significant one in this regard, given you see it as part of the next big stage for NBN.
I see we have a job to do in terms of making sure we're informing the public. As we said, as we roll out, we have to do a better job than we've done up to now in, as I mentioned before, in supplying information, in responding to questions, into allaying misinformation that may be out in the public domain.
Usually spread by your spokesperson.
So that's obviously some work to do. To make decisions on how best to do that, you need to have good data.
Who is your market research shared with? Is it simply shared? Who is the market research shared with? Is it simply internally kept between the management team in the board? Do you share it with the shareholder ministers?
Certainly, we would if the board, and I think there's varying degrees of that, Senator. Certainly, if our board wanted to know any details about that research we were doing, normally they would want to know about the conclusions we're reaching. They may not want to go into the details, but if they did want to go into the details, of course we would share that with the board. And as always, if our shareholder asks us some specific questions, we obviously provide the information.
Have you, to your knowledge, provided market research information to the shareholder ministers at all?
I can't answer that one off the top of my head. I have to inquire.
Okay. Mr Quigley, are you able to give any sort of ballpark as to what NBN Co expects to spend in market research, polling and data and so on over the duration of the contracts you're currently letting, whatever terms you might be able to answer the question in? I don't want to box you into something that you can't answer.
We probably have an ongoing number for our 2000 2011-2012 year, and we'll be obviously going into a budgeting process looking at 2012-2013. What those numbers are, off the top of my head, I don't have.
Okay. Was UMR initially employed or employed on the recommendation of Mr. Kaiser?
No.
And did
Not
Mr.
that I'm aware of.
Did Mr. Kaiser
I
play...
can't remember ever any time Mr. Kaiser coming recommending UMR to me.
Did Mr. Kaiser play a role in that tender process originally?
I'm not sure we went to... what I described is what a process that we have recently gone through to select an agency which Mr. Kaiser was not part of.
Mr. Kaiser was not part of this most recent tender?
That's correct.
Previously in his role handling communications matters and so on, presumably he would have been, though, in his previous role?
He may well have been, but we did, frankly, a minimum amount of that sort of work. It wasn't a big factor in the company. It was a minimal amount of work because we were doing many other things.
And are you aware if Mr. Kaiser ever used UMR in his prior political life?
I'm sure that he would have.
No idea.
I'll trust that the Minister has better knowledge on this one issue than you necessarily would, Mr. Quigley.
Let me put it this way. I'd be shocked if he hadn't.
Indeed. As would I, Minister.
How's Mark Textor?
They are known to have been the Labor Party pollster, and I can't remember at what period of time Mr. Kaiser was the State Secretary in Queensland, but seeing as they were used by the Labor Party, I think in the 1992, 1995, 1998, 2001 and 2004 Queensland state elections, I'm pretty sure Mr. Kaiser was there at some stage.
I'd be shocked.
2 minutes.
Okay. Can I move quickly to another issue? Mr. Quigley, on your website there is a spreadsheet that's headlined NBN Co Rollout Plan Greenfields Construction.
Sorry, Senator, I can't hear you again.
Order.
On your website, the NBN Co website, there is a spreadsheet headlined NBN Co Rollout Plan Greenfields Construction. Mm-hmm. You're familiar with the website?
I'm familiar with our website, yes, Senator.
You're familiar with the spreadsheet?
We have a number of spreadsheets on our website with rollout data.
Okay. And would I be interpreting this spreadsheet correctly if I said that it seems to indicate there are 264 developments that have around 2,000 premises on them that are expected to be passed by the network by June of this year?
I would have to go look at that spreadsheet to make sure you're interpreting it correctly, but those numbers sound reasonable in terms of the numbers of premises. You said 2,000 per estate? That's way too high.
No, 2,000 overall.
Okay, 2,000 overall. That's yes, makes more sense. Yes.
Yep. Okay. Well, I'm pleased that if it's in the ballpark, that's all good. So you accept that that's ballpark estimate 2,000 premises that will have been passed by June, and therefore 2,000-ish greenfields premises that can purchase services over the NBN if they wish, once obviously the commercial retail arrangements are finalised and so on.
Just again, subject to the point that Mr. Quigley's been making, that some of the early data was transferred back to Telstra, so subject to that caveats that he made earlier, those figures sound right.
Okay,
Thanks.
I apologise, Minister,
No,
that I was elsewhere.
No, I don't think you were trying to catch anybody out in a deliberative way, but there was quite a bit of discussion about what was no longer an NBN responsibility.
Senator Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Quigley, referring to the mobile towers in the Daruka region, suburb of Tamworth.
Tamworth. Have you got a copy of the OPEL towers yet? Did you get a copy of that?
Chair. Can I continue without the interruption of Senator?
Allow Senator Williams to ask the question.
So you received the questions on notice. We gave you some advance to this question. I'm going to ask you now, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, in Daruka, residents concerned that the tower is too close to some of their home place, their residence. Mm-hmm. Does NBN Co consult nearby residents to gauge their acceptance of where a tower is to be placed?
We go through the normal processes which we notify local residents in Daruka based on the requirements of the New South Wales State Environmental Planning Policy, Infrastructure 2007. And we're in the process now of consulting with those residents who have lodged objections. Yes. So we make the plans clear, they lodge objections. This includes looking at alternatives to try and address the issues raised in their objections regarding visual amenity and electromagnetic radiation effects and their concerns.
Okay. Do you have a standard code where there's a certain distance between the houses and where the tower will go? Is there
no, there isn't a code for that. In fact, what is done is the ACMA, same one, I believe, the ACMA has made mandatory EMA exposure limits for installations such as broadcast towers and mobile phone base stations. They set limits, they don't set distances. And those limits are set by, they're determined by the Australian Radiation Protection and Nuclear Safety Agency.
Okay. So, to your knowledge, do you know if there, with the radiation that can be expected from this tower, any distance that would have to be away from the homes?
When you put your mobile phone to your
So,
head.
in fact, if I can quote, today I saw from Professor Peter Johnston, who's the branch head of Medical Radiation Services, the Australian Radiation Protection and Nuclear Safety Agency, that same agency, he said the exposure standard is based on known health effects, and these health effects occur at relatively high powers, and the powers being generated adjacent to the phone towers are relatively small. He says that people are much more likely to be exposed to high levels of EMRs using a mobile phone close to their ears.
Okay.
This is where the highest exposures occur to human beings. Exposures due to phone towers are thousands of times smaller.
Okay. Is the tower proposed for Daruka a low-impact facility, a low-impact tower facility?
The equipment that goes on those towers is a low-impact facility, I believe.
How high are those towers?
Those towers are 40 metres, so the tower itself is not a low-impact facility.
So it's it's going to be a low-impact facility, but it's going to have a 40-metre tower, correct?
No, it's the tower itself is not a low-impact facility.
The low-impact.
It's classed, by the way, it's a monopole. It's a single pole, and it's classed as a complying development under New South Wales State Environment Planning Policy.
Okay. This tower is going to service 360 residents in that Daruka area. Mm-hmm. Okay? But there are 1,600 residents in that village, in that suburb of Tamworth. Now, this is from a meeting yesterday with NBN up there where they tried to get some answers to locals. The tower will service 360 residents or subscribers. Daruka has about 1,600 residents.
Yes.
So what's the story
About?
then? Yeah, roughly
Residents?
16.
How many homes, premises?
Okay.
Are you talking about premises or residents, Senator?
Good question, because they didn't clarify this, but they're
Because
saying...
it's a premise-based policy.
Okay, exactly. But what they're saying is 360 residents and 1,600 residents. So if we put them in perspective, we're going to see about 1/5 serviced with this tower, because they're an inline direction tower, okay? If you've got the hills and the gullies, they won't be efficient. Is that correct?
When you do radio planning for any radio network, you've got to take account of the topography, yes.
Okay. So this tower is going to go in, and it may well, by the look of the locals with their meeting of NBN saying it's going to service 1/5 of the community. So the other 4/5 will have to go by satellite.
No, not necessarily. This could be one... the
more
DAs
towers.
are done on a tower-by-tower basis. Obviously, in a cluster, you can have multiple towers.
So there's a chance you might have multiple towers in this Daruka area.
That's
what you're just saying now.
I'm saying in a radio coverage area, you obviously normally have multiple towers.
So there'll be multiple towers around this Daruka. That's obviously, you're not just put one tower there, there'll be multiple towers, that's what you're saying?
I'd say I'd have to go and look at the radio planning for this particular site to answer that question definitively.
So there could be multiple towers put up there.
What I'm saying is if
have a look.
a limited number of premises that you can put on any one radio sector.
Yeah. So in other words, if what the meeting with NBN Co yesterday was held, if the one tower just can service 1/5 of the community, they may have to have 5 towers, correct?
I'd have to go and look at the numbers, Senator, to see if we're talking about premises or...
No, so I just wanted to add to the answer before we left Senator Williams. I'm happy if you didn't ask another question, but I would like to add to the answer, because I think there's a particular blogger who has read your article with some interest. He's on Whirlpool, which you may be familiar with. His name's Tailgater, and he summed up the article this morning in the following way, and I just thought it was particularly succinct and appropriate.
Chair, has my time expired?
Yes.
Yeah, but I
The
haven't
Minister
finished the
goes on
answer.
with a political swill now.
I accept that he may be referring to visual.
Questions, yeah.
I accept he may be referring to visual pollution and devaluation of property values, but it carries connotations of noise. You're referring to wind towers.
Thank you.
What is the solution? Why to push for an increased rollout of FTTH? Yep. He wants it to run another 10 kilometres and installed in a town called Jaruka, outside of Tamworth. And fair enough too. After all, he has to look after the interests of his constituents.
Well, Tony Windsor would look after them.
well,
They
Senator,
approached him, and he wouldn't address it, so he came to my office.
I can finish.
That's
Yet
why.
What Senator John Williams fails to appreciate is that he is arguing for an extension of the very policy that the coalition of which he is a part is hell-bent on repealing. The hypocrisy is astounding and so blatant that I can't really believe that he isn't aware of it. In which case, what it does do is demonstrate the naked duplicity and dishonesty of the Nationals, not to mention the deception being practised on the Nationals' voter base. The voters of the National Party need to
almost finished,
recognise
Senator Conroy?
they're being
Yeah, it's just
deceived.
a farce, Chair, just an absolute farce.
Are being deceived in a most venal and arrogant manner by their elected representatives who pay lip service to the electorate while destroying the work, the very thing they're supposedly fighting against. Shame. I could not put it.
Senator
I
Boyce.
could not put it better
Order.
myself.
Senator Boyce, you've got the call.
So the logic of that, Minister, is that we shouldn't critique policies we don't agree with, even if your government's going to go ahead with them. But
Hypocrites is the analysis
well,
there. You shouldn't be hypocrites.
Under the plan that you currently
He's
have,
arguing for an extension
you
of fibre to the
include
home.
Australian industry participation plans.
Senator Boyce, I thought you'd have moved on to your questions.
I just did. I did, Chair. I just did, Chair, until you
Listen.
But I will proceed. Australian industry participation plans, and I noticed that you have you've responded to complaints about the satellite, the tendering system for satellites not involving Australian companies.
That's because there aren't any Australian satellite manufacturers.
Can she finish the question?
Well,
zero.
I mean, Newsat would argue with you
They
that
don't manufacture. They were going to buy theirs from an American company. They don't manufacture a satellite.
if I could just finish the question.
Lockheed Martin, they were going to buy
If I
it
could
from
just-
Lockheed Martin.
Conroy,
The rest of
company.
the question
Senator
is that
Conroy,
with the
allow
ground
Senator Boyce to
segment
ask the question.
contract, you say that you have an Australian industry participation plan, and yet the two final bidders, as I understand it, for the ground system component are both US companies. Is that correct, Mr Quigley?
No, I can't answer questions on a tender that's open at the moment, Senator.
Okay. Could you talk us through the opportunities for Australian innovative companies to be involved in the NBN? Because at the present time it looks like we'll end up with a lot of very experienced cable pullers and not much more.
No, we have...
That's just embarrassing.
There's in fact a whole range of activities that are being undertaken by Australian companies in the NBN project.
Can you quantify that for me, Mr
Yes, we
Quigley?
can quantify it, and I'd be happy to quantify it.
I have done on a number of occasions, but we're happy to update it for you.
It's approximately 50% of the capex we expect to spend is, in fact, with Australian companies, such as Warren and Brown. And I would, in fact, if I could comment on behalf of the construction industry, I wouldn't characterise them as simple cable pullers. The job they do for us is a lot of detailed design.
All right. Can we look at the parts of the project that are not involved with underground or pole putting in, but the high-tech aspects of the... That's the area I'm interested in, the high-tech aspects of the NBN. I don't want to know about whether you've got 50% of the cable layers or 50% of whatever. It's just that component that is not involved in...
Laying cable and splicing fibre is actually quite a complex business. It'll take quite a bit of retraining
I'm
to
perfectly aware
upgrade
of that,
copper technicians to become
it is
fibre
no longer,
technicians.
I would think, Minister, a high-tech industry, in that it's something that's been done for some considerable time.
I will circulate your statement widely.
To give you an example, Senator, we're using a company that I think was spun out of Queensland University, which is called Biari, which is a group of industrial mathematicians. And we believe some of the work they're doing is really groundbreaking. They're doing optimisation And we've got quite a significant contract with them for so they're a very small
company. Are you
company.
able to give us the figures for that contract?
We can't give you the exact numbers, of course, but I will try and do our best to tell you roughly how much.
If you could give me on notice
Yes.
some details about that, but that is the characterisation of things I'm looking at. Mr. Quigley, the other thing I'd like you to do is respond to the
40 trained staff to come with the satellites that we're going to be trained.
Yes, of course there is. We're going to be setting up, obviously, for something as complex as a satellite, you need some very skilled people. So just in NBN Co alone, we have today more than 20 trained staff who, by the way, have some 250 years of satellite experience.
I don't think I wasn't actually asking about NBN employees. I was asking
40 new people to be trained.
I was asking about opportunities for Australian high-tech
40
companies.
new trained people to run the satellite.
I was not, however,
high-tech.
asking about staff, Minister. I was asking about opportunities for
40 new
groundbreaking
Mr. Quigley,
technology to happen
could you take
in
that
Australia.
question?
Could you take that on notice?
Groundbreaking
Could you,
technology.
Mr. Quigley, also respond to the criticisms that I have heard about the bundling of these contracts being such that only very large multinational companies have an opportunity to tender for them, that if these tenders were broken, or the contracts were broken down into smaller components, there would be better opportunities for Australian companies to compete.
Could you point to one of the contracts?
I beg your pardon?
Rather than just saying...
Could I...
just point to one of them you think has been bundled.
Order.
Point to
Senator
one of them
Boyce.
I was asking Mr.
I'm just asking a clarifying question. Could you point...
Do you want me to provide some of the criticisms?
Senator
I'm
Boyce.
asking you to point to one of the bundled contracts you're criticising, just to assist Mr Quigley provide you with the answer.
Well, there was Newsat's critique on the satellite development contract.
They don't manufacture satellites.
But manufacturing satellites are not presumably the only component in that contract, are they? No. Mr Quigley, could you please respond to the bundling?
Okay, let me take the one you've obviously interested in. You've got the feedback on, Senator. If we look at the satellite business, we've broken that up into a number of parts. There's the satellite manufacture, there's the launch, there's the Earth stations, there's the VSAT terminals.
What Australian manufacturers
Senator
have
Boyce,
got?
out of time, this is the
Australian
last
companies have
question.
got contracts under that.
Are you talking about manufacturing? What Australian
Well,
companies
sorry,
have manufactured?
I corrected myself. Not manufacturers, Australian companies.
There are no Australian companies that manufacture any of this stuff.
No, I didn't say manufacture. I said there's. Well, you've broken it down. You say into smallish components.
Yes. So let me be clear, Senator. What we're not prepared to do is introduce between us in NBN Co and the satellite manufacturer a middleman who simply does nothing more than
manage and clip the
the interaction. For one thing, it would be more expensive, and for number two, it would in fact put the project at greater risk, because all we do is lengthen the communication channels.
Thanks, Senator Boyce. Well over time.
I'll put two questions
well over
on
time. I
notice
have to
then.
put them on notes. Mr. Quigley, I've got a couple of minutes, so could you just give me your view in relation to this debate about the satellites and the best use of taxpayers' money in relation to the satellites?
Okay.
Quigley was talking about satellites with Senator Boyce. You needed to interrupt to do that, Chair.
He was trying to educate Senator Boyce, but he failed.
Senator MacDonald, I don't need your help. Mr. Quigley.
That's not possible.
Order, Mr. Quigley.
Okay. In terms of what we regarded as the right answer for the satellite solution for this 3% of the population, there were very few options, to be honest, Senator. There simply isn't enough satellite capacity that you could lease. In fact, for our interim satellite service, which we're providing, which is providing 6 megabits per second down, at a much lower amount of throughput, we simply...
It usually takes 3 times...
Order.
We simply could not.
Order!
We could not lease any more capacity than would provide for 48,000 end users. So to say that we should lease satellite capacity, it isn't there. It simply doesn't exist. Now, is it possible that somebody could speculate and say they would put some new satellites up to meet that requirement if we placed an order with them? That simply would not be a sensible use of taxpayers' money. The best thing we can do is because we got advice.
He spent 2 years looking at it and got McKinsey looked at it before him.
Because we got advice from a range of experts, including Dr. Gordon Pike, who used to work in Optus, who is recognised as one of Australia's leading satellite experts. All the advice we got, Senator, pointed in exactly the same direction. You need to go and contract for satellite manufacture yourself. Do not put somebody between you and the satellite manufacturer.
Did you seek any estimates of the cost?
Order, Senator Birmingham. You do not have the call. You do not have the call.
Simon, you
don't have the call
wrong on this. Like, you couldn't be so far wrong. It's embarrassing. Don't barrack for Turnbull on this one.
Yeah.
It's just wrong.
Yeah. Mr. Quigley, Senator Birmingham, order.
Well,
order,
if you want him to
Senator
reveal
Birmingham.
Confidential tendering information from unsuccessful
That concludes
bidders, sure,
the committee's
he could do that.
examination of the
But
broadband
you're
communications.
completely wrong.
Order! 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 Are you going to order? Are you going to... Any order?
Beg your pardon, Senator.
That concludes the committee's examination of the broadband communications and the digital economy. Senators are reminded that written questions on notice should be provided to the Secretariat by close of business next Monday, the 20th of February. Thanks, Hansard. Thanks, officers, and thanks to the Secretariat and broadcasting. Thank you. All done.
Thank you. You're jealous, Bridget. The best offer is that to the